and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 305th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studio of Azle, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show. I've been looking forward to this conversation for oh so long, and it's going to be fantastic to sit down with this gentleman all the way from across the world. But before we get to formal introductions, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible. And of course, tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate has announced that Blackened M81, Maduro to the Core, and S84 Shade to Black by Drew Estate are now expanding internationally. What a fortuitous press release for this weekend tonight's show. Drew Estate is thrilled to announce the highly anticipated international launch of Cigar Line's Blackened cigars, M81, Maduro to the Core, and S84 Shade to Black. These exceptional Blackened cigars, which represent a new chapter in the collaboration between Jonathan Drew, founder and president of Drew Estate, James Hetfield of Metallica, and Rob Dietrich, master distiller and blender of Blackened American whiskey, will be launched and ready to order at Inner Tobacco 2024. That was this past week. Over across the pond, as we say in the United States, over in Europe. The Blackened cigar journey began with the creation of the Blackened M81, a heavy leaf cigar born out of a shared passion for music, fellowship, and the art of cigar making. Hetfield, Dietrich, and Drew collaborated closely, drawing on their collective expertise and love of the leaf. The result is a robust and flavorful smoke wrapped in a thick, oily Maduro leaf, Mexican San Andreas Valley wrapper, Nicaraguan and Pennsylvania broadleaf Maduro fillers, and of course a Maduro binder, making this a Maduro release to the core. Shortly after, the S84 Shade to Black was released as well, and now will be available internationally soon. Anytime you are traveling internationally, you can also get your Blackened cigars wherever Drew Estate cigars are sold. And welcome, everyone. This is our 305th take. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome in tonight's guest, sponsored by United Cigar. Smoke once a day and start living united. Mr. Reinhard Pohorec of Meerapfel Cigar and Light 'em Up Lounge. Reinhard, how you doing tonight?
Fair. Thank you so much for having me. Privileged to be here.
Oh, the privilege is mine, my friend. Thank you so much. All the way around the world. It's 4:00 your local time, or 4:30 rather.
4:40 already.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
I mentioned earlier, this is a bit of a surreal experience. I'm in Essen, out of all places, after an extremely busy and very successful Intertabak trade show in Dortmund, and I'm sitting at the cigar shop Baidar and Sahin in Essen, and my good friends, the owners, Onur and Gökçay, they gave me the keys to their shop and their lounge and showed me around and be like, you help yourself. This is your home.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm so fortunate to do the show from here, because when we scheduled the whole thing, I said to Onur, where the hell am I going to find a spot at 4 a.m. in the morning where I have Wi-Fi, electricity to charge my computer, and I can smoke a cigar? And he said, well, I know just a place. So here we are, and I'm very privileged and fortunate to be here, not only at this lounge, but most importantly with you, Bear, and with the entire ELOSOFUMAR family. I love your show. I love your work. You're not only a true gentleman, but also an exceptional journalist, interviewer, and I always try to follow the show as much as I can. We had the privilege of hosting you at the Light 'em Up Lounge as well. Yeah. So I'm so much looking forward to tonight's show and sharing a little bit about what we do with the world.
It was such a fun experience being on that show, and thank you so much for those very, very kind words. Just unbelievable to have you here. This marks the second international interview that I've done on this show. I had Manolo Casada of Casada Cigar Company. He was in Spain at the time. He lives over in this part of the hemisphere for most of the year, but for a couple of reasons, I think he was visiting family or something in Spain. And I was telling him and his representatives, I was like, oh, we can wait till he gets back. He's like, no, he wants to do the show over in Spain. I was like, it'll be like 3 or 4 in the morning. He's like, yeah, it's okay. And I was like, okay, all right. So both of you were so enthusiastic to do this, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
No, it goes without saying.
So, well, Well, Reinhard, I know we're going to be talking a lot of tonight. But you mentioned Intertabac. Um, and for a lot of my audience, I don't think I talk enough about and it's very American of me, I guess. I talk a lot about PCA and everything, and while that is the center of the cigar world over here, Intertabac, is the international center of the cigar world. But it's a little bit different than PCA. What was your experience like this year, and what can you tell us about it?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to realize that Intertabak, unlike PCA, is not primarily focused on the sales aspect and writing orders, pushing out deals. It's more of a network gathering where the brands and the manufacturers they meet their international distributors, some retailers, of course, and the show itself is just humongous. It's enormous and not exclusively focused on premium cigars. So the Westfalenhallen Messe in Dortmund, it's massive, and there's various different halls and different buildings even focused on, I guess, everything from vape to shisha tobacco, and they even had a CBD tent, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
Um,
wow, okay.
our dear fellow Charlie, he wrote an excellent analysis of the Inter on Half Wheel. So, in case you're interested, check it out. It's fabulous, I think. And he wrote a little bit about all the other aspects and segments of the show, which, to be honest, I had absolutely zero interest in and even less time to check out. So I couldn't really talk about that. But in terms of the premium cigar aspect, it's ever growing. There is plenty more focus from the mostly US focused boutique brands on opening the international markets and finding distributors for Europe, the Middle East, Asia, parts of Africa, and beyond. So that side is truly exciting and ever growing. I also spoke with Katrin Fischer from Messe Dortmund. She's in charge of Intertabak and Intersupply, and I think she did a great job again this year. She was very happy, said that the numbers looked incredibly exciting. So I can only report good things. But I also have to confess, Intertabak to me is always like one big hangover. It's like, and then you wake up, it's Sunday, the whole thing is over, and you're like, what the heck just happened?
What just happened? It was like a
Because
whirlwind.
honestly, I get up in the morning, brush my teeth, shower, get dressed, jump into the cab, onto the trade show. You set up the booth, meetings all day. I did not have time for one bathroom break. I didn't eat all day. And then at some point, it's like 6 to 30. You head straight off to some evening event or dinner. Um, you wind up things at 1 in the morning, probably fall asleep and do it all over again for like
Yeah.
3 days. But it's wonderful. That's what we do. That's what we love. We meet people from all around the world. All of those folks are enthusiastic about premium cigars. They love the community and the camaraderie. So we're so blessed in that sense, and I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people. Um, I managed, don't tell anybody, to sneakily get away from the booth for a little while and just to do some rounds and see all the other people because these are all good friends of ours, and
Hmm.
to spend time with Lido Gomez and Tony, to see Jonathan Drew and Pedro over at the
True
booth
estate.
as well, and
Hmm.
then of course the Schuster family, the Van der Marliere family, spent some time with Nestor Andres Plasencia. Um, it's never ending. I could go on for hours just talking about that, but it was a surreal and wonderful experience all at the same time.
It's awesome. How many interacts have you? I've never been. Is how many times have you attended?
I want to say 7 times in total.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
And you've been to PCA or IPCPR before that, just a couple of times, right? By
Four
comparison.
times, want to say.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I I know that it's different in some of the ways that you kind of mentioned and stuff, particularly about the way cigars are distributed in Europe. You know, there's not reps, there's not cigar reps like there are in this country, or brokers even. The brokers are the distributors themselves and stuff. So business gets done a little bit differently. So I've always wanted to go into tents just to kind of observe that kind of transactional relationship to see how that kind of takes place and everything. So that's awesome. Well, I'm glad it was a successful show. I'm glad you survived, and here you are this very early morning to hang out with me and have a conversation and a cigar. So, speaking of which, I was very fortunate. Speaking of PCA and shows and everything, I was very fortunate to receive a gift from you at last year's PCA. You gave me this box, and you said you wanted me to save it for a time that we could share it together. And I thought, well, none other than tonight when I had you as a guest on my show. So it still got the cellophane on it as proof that I did not break that promise to you. So while I'm opening it and everything, what can you tell us a little bit about what I'm about to smoke tonight?
Well, maybe you can just rip it open and show us what's inside,
Okay,
because usually it's a little nice surprise.
okay.
Um,
Here, here
as
we
you can
go.
probably tell from the way it's packed, there's going to be a Meerapfel cigar in there, two in
Yes.
fact. And this wonderful little box that you have in your hands is not something that's commercially available. It's just a personal gift that either Jeremiah or myself we
Oh wow.
hand over to people we love and care about, and you most certainly are one of them. So I'm very happy that you get to enjoy one of these wonderful creations.
Oh, it's beautiful. What a
I'll
beautiful
smoke
picture.
one with you. So I know that usually the show goes on for a little while. So I brought three cigars just in case.
Oh, it's
Oh,
gorgeous.
look at that.
They're gorgeous. Oh my goodness.
So you're looking at two different Vitolas in our Ernst master blend, and the way you can tell them apart most easily is the laser cut pattern on the ring. So if I show you this one
Oh,
here,
okay. Oh
I will be
yeah.
smoking our Mayer Lonsdale, and we call this pattern the Genesis, the rays of
Okay.
light, whereas you clearly see the waves
Mm-hmm.
on the ring of your cigars,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's gorgeous. Okay. And this is the Ernst. Okay.
and that represents the waves, given that Ernest's Mayer's son and Ernst, the great grandfather of Jeremiah, Joshua, and Melissa, our present family generation. Ernst was an adventurer, and he sailed to Indonesia, where he discovered Sumatra tobacco and brought back Sumatra seed to Europe,
Okay.
hence the waves on the ring.
Oh,
And we
beautiful.
can talk a little bit about the intricacies and the details of all the historical implications and how that translates not only in the design, but what I find most fascinating, the experience in terms of the aromatic profile and taste profile of the cigars, because Meerapfel cigar is a tribute to the family history and the legacy of the Meerapfels. So every aspect and every component is a reflection of the unique characteristics of the various different family members.
Hmm. Well, the cold draw is absolutely perfect. Um, the aroma on the foot is quite faint, but it's rich. There's some richness to it as well, so I'm really looking forward to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and light this up, and we'll get this experience on the roll. So I like to toast my cigar a little bit. I'm using the ST DuPont Fluo lighter. These came out this year. They were just
Oh,
released
these
to
are
market.
lovely. And you got the best color. I love the orange.
Yeah, I love it was just coincidence. I'm my favorite colors are green and red, which is Christmas time. But I really, when I saw these, I really love the orange, and I happened to get the orange from our good friends at Coles of London and ST DuPont. So, um, oh, that aroma is gorgeous. Oh wow. Okay. God, that aroma is sensational and it's very clean. Like it doesn't like it's not terribly like potent or very peppery or anything like that, but it's still got a wonderful fragrance to it. That's gorgeous. All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, let's to enjoy it. And you did I usually ask this question a little bit later on in our artista segment, but what kind of cut do you use on your cigar typically?
Only one.
Sure. Okay.
I Whenever I have a chance, I use scissors because I think it's by far the most elegant and the most controlled way to cut the cigar. True precision and yeah, the elegance and finesse of it is magnificent. My favorite one is the Smoking Moses razor cut from my dear brother Aldo, Smoking Moses in Italy. Also because it's got the cleanest and most perfect cut with that razor blade sitting on top, and it goes through the 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 cap of the cigar like butter.
Hmm.
But I know you'll say, well, how dare you? But the cutter I probably use most often is my fingernails. I'm on the road all the time, and I don't like to bring, all the fancy and expensive cutters and lighters with me just to have them taken away from some random airport security guy who knows nothing about what he has in his hands.
Indeed.
And I'm very much a soft flame person, so whenever possible, always use a soft flame to light the cigars.
I've mentioned this a few times. My brother could lights a cigar with a match better and more gracefully than any person I've ever seen in my life. It's like watching art when he
Yeah,
does it. And he always gets the lit perfectly correct, the razor sharp burn. It's insane with the match. All right. Well, let's get into tonight's major point. But before we do, we have to thank our friends who do sponsor our major point, which is brought to you by Gran Habano Cigars. From the fertile lands of Honduras, George Rico and his family have put together the very best vintages for you. Yes, you, the cigar smoker. From value-based hits like the Corojo Number 5 to the award-winning 20th anniversary to special projects like Zulu Zulu, Gran Habano is about cultivating the best and making pinnacle cigars for the market. Culture, tradition, quality, premium handcrafted Gran Habano cigars. And I've neglected to mention that at the top of the show, tonight's audio broadcast is also brought to you by Gran Habano Cigars. Honest, compassionate, great cigars. Be sure you download, subscribe, and review today wherever you listen to podcasts, courtesy of Gran Habano Cigars. So, Reinhard, well, as we start to enjoy our cigars, we'll talk about them a little bit more here in a few minutes, but um, I kind of wanted to kind of go back to the beginning. You're as we were talking about before the show kicked off. And I knew this from kind of just interviews that I've seen you do and things like that. I know you're from Vienna. So was that where you were born and raised? Was in Vienna?
absolutely. Born and raised true Viennese.
That's
Not so many, I guess.
it's one of the more it's one of the most beautiful cities I think in Europe. I mean, did I mean growing up, did you travel a lot around Europe, or did you kind of just stay in Vienna, or
Where I grew up in very simple and humble family, in a very simple and humble family background. We didn't have the means to travel internationally. I spent the little vacation that we had in the Austrian Alps hiking or skiing, and Yeah, we never had much, but the one thing that resonated most with me in my earliest childhood memories go back to the family table, and being in the kitchen with my grandfather, kneading dough, baking bread. That's sort of the things that that are deeply engraved in my DNA. So no, I did not have the privilege to travel much when I was a young kid. It was only, when I was 12, 14 that we traveled to Portugal once. I had the opportunity to go to Scotland with my family at some point.
Oh wow.
And it was only through my career and the various different steps that I've taken work-wise, business-wise, passion-wise, that led me to places far, far away from home and all around the globe. And I love discovering new countries, new cultures, meeting people, mostly through food and drinks and cigars, because I think that's when you truly get to understand different cultures and countries. But that only came later in life. My childhood memories very much revolve around Austria and being at home with family or being somewhere out in nature.
That's awesome. I mean, I imagine the outdoors are beautiful in Austria. It's such a beautiful, like I said, city. I I recently traveled home to where I grew up, which was El Paso, Texas, which is nothing like Vienna. Um, but I imagine that um, as I was there and I was thinking about tonight's show and everything, knowing not knowing the answer to your question, I was wondering if growing up, wherever we happen to grow up, if Parisians happen to know that it's Paris, do they have it, does it hold that kind of that regard? Does in Vienna being the majestic city that it is to people who don't live there, right? I mean, did
I
you have
completely get
a
what I know exactly what you're saying, and I keep repeating this to my friends and particularly people when they come and visit Austria. It was only when friends from abroad came to the city that I went on a tour of the Schönbrunn Castle with them with an English audio guide, 15 minutes away from my house, and I had a very dear and beloved friend from the US coming over together with her parents, and we were touring the castle. And when people asked me for the way, I told them, Sorry, I'm not a local," just because I love the experience so much. And you don't do touristy stuff in your own city. It's
Yeah, of
fascinating.
course. Yeah,
You
exactly.
travel to all these places just to do the most awkward stuff, spend a fortune on it, and feel like, well, this is the greatest thing on earth. And then at home you have, like, for me, we were so spoiled. Vienna is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. There's everything to offer, and you don't do all these things because it's
Hmm.
it's too close, right?
Right.
But I try to deliberately explore, experience, and treasure these things even in my own city. But it was truly only after I had been traveling all around the world and discovering different cities, different countries, that I started to embrace and enjoy home even more. And as you can probably tell, I'm a very family oriented and I'm a very homely person. So to me, family and home means the world. This is where I recharge my batteries. This is where I ground myself and where I feel my roots and where I come from. So that to me is everything.
Hmm.
But I I couldn't appreciate it the way I do if I hadn't had the experience to go to Mexico, Brazil, to Africa, to Russia, to all places in Europe, to the US, of course. Um, I think we need that in order to better understand ourselves and where we come from.
What did like you mentioned a little bit about how you grew up, but I mean, what did your parents do for a living? Where you know they're in Austria, in Vienna.
My mother stayed at home with my brother and I, and I'm very grateful for it, and we were blessed in the sense that we could go out to nature together with my mother, or we could do stuff around the house together with her. So when I was young, she was at home with us. My father worked in the bank, even though he originally planned to become an opera singer, and he had an offer to do so. However, he decided to follow the the stable career path and have a consistent income so he could provide
Oh,
for my family. But
oh
music has
man.
been very important for all of us. I grew up playing the piano, singing. I played a lot of music in church. We did a lot of social work around our local community and our local parish. And yeah, very, very simple and really nothing special. My mother later on worked as a secretary, and that very straightforward, simple, humble upbringing. But as I said, family and the family table, that's truly what made me who I am now, and
Mhm.
made me realize how important and wonderful it is to have a simple, honest, handcrafted product in your hands. That's where my enjoyment, my appreciation, and my deep respect for great food, drinks, and the humble cigar came from.
My mother stayed at home as well while my father worked. Um, and it's interesting. I mentioned my going back to my hometown was for my father's memorial last week, and um, I often wonder. My father was a great man for a lot of reasons, and you know, I often wonder if he took the stable path, and that's I'm gonna find more and more regrets as more time passes that he's no longer here. And but I often wonder now sometimes, like what dreams did he give up on? Or was family his dream? Was that it? And that I
Yeah.
mean, there's not everyone has to have this grand idea of what a dream could be. It could be something simple like, a beautiful home, beautiful family, and being, you know, a great contributor to their community and stuff. So I mean, it's it's one of those things. But man, opera. I bet did he still? I mean, you said you grew up with around music. Did he still sing in at the
Still
home
does.
and other
Yeah,
places? Oh, wonderful.
it still does.
Oh, that's
Now more
great.
than ever. After he retired, he had plenty more time to do so,
Oh, that's
and
great.
he very much enjoys that. He's going to be 80 next year, so despite his age, and he's still
That's
very active.
wonderful. That's great. Does he go? Did he take you to the opera? Because here in the United States, like opera is very like it's very expensive. It's very posh. It's very upper class. Is it that way in Europe? Because or in Vienna with it, kind of being that's kind of like the center of a lot of it.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's deeply engraved in our culture, and it's very present. Obviously, the opera house, the world famous Vienna Opera House in the city center, is what a lot of people visit when they come to town, and it's part of the catalog of Viennese experiences you're supposed to have whenever you visit. But my grandfather, for example, he was a veteran from World War II. He lost one of his legs in Russia. So he was on crutches his whole life, and he was an extremely hardworking man, humble and loving and caring. But he went to the opera house, but he was standing there for 3 hours because they couldn't afford expensive tickets. So it does not have to be a posh experience. There's also very affordable tickets, or you can be in the stands where you don't have a seat, but you stand there, and God knows that can be exhausting when you go through like a 4 hours Wagner
Wagner, I was gonna say Wagner is four
experience.
hours.
So yeah,
It's it's
I
two of
I
my
don't know.
podcasts out there for people who don't know what we're talking about. It's like listening to two of my podcasts. That's what it is.
But we didn't go to the opera so much. I always enjoyed musicals, and different types of concerts. Nowadays, I make it a our annual Christmas ritual for Christine and I that we go to Christmas in Vienna, which again is very cliche and very touristy, but I absolutely adore Christmas, and Vienna is one of the best cities to enjoy the Advent time and the Christmas markets. And Christmas in Vienna is a gorgeous, wonderful concert. It's extremely festive, and that's the kind of stuff that I like to do.
Europeans know how to do Christmas. Like that's y'all's thing. Like that is a 100% accurate statement. I had the good fortune of going to Germany a few years ago,
Mhm.
early December, so around Christmas time. Just
Beautiful.
magic, absolute magic. So, um, so with those beginnings and everything, did you go to university? Um, I'm not sure of how I mean, I know that's obviously a part of the education system there, but like your secondary education, like what was that like? And did you attend university and where?
So I had to work from a very early age on, and I wanted to just to help and support my family. Um, at around the age of 15 or 16, I said to my parents, well, since I still live here, I'm gonna pay you rent. And so I always had jobs. I worked in the hospitality industry. I worked in catering to to earn some money. I became a skiing instructor, so I could afford my university studies. I worked with handicapped pupils for a while.
Wait, let's go
Um,
back for a second. You told your parents you were going to pay them rent?
yep,
It
and
was
I
your
did.
decision. Oh wow,
Mhm.
wow.
And
Every parent watching my show now is like, why didn't I have a son like Reinhard?
so yeah, skiing instructor, handicapped pupils, some social work. I for a certain while thought if I was going to become a professional musician. So I played drums a lot. I did some session drumming and studio recordings with my brother. I had a funk trio, and I was touring mostly in and around Vienna and the club scene there, playing some wonderful and beautiful gigs. Um, but like my father, I thought I have to follow a somewhat stable and safe career path, and I always felt like there was a bit of a chip on my shoulder coming from these humble upbringings. I wanted to succeed in life, whatever the fuck that is, and get a proper career and earn decent money so I could provide for my family. Hence, I studied socioeconomics and just had all sorts of jobs on the side to be able to afford all of that. But I had a severe illness when I was around 20, which stopped me for a while. And it made me reconsider life and what's truly important for me. Because I only realized through the entire process and also doing therapy, which I think is extremely valuable and important for everybody, that I always took care of other people. I always wanted to help and support other people and please other people. And there was one person I always forgot in the equation, and that was myself. So at some point, I just couldn't do it anymore. And since I wouldn't allow myself to stop, or I wouldn't stop myself, I kind of did it through other subconscious ways, and it was a blessing in the end, because I went back to my roots, and I rediscovered my roots through the wine industry. I fondly remember I sat at the WSET, their most basic introductory seminar, where you mostly study the local wine scene. So you learn about Austrian wines primarily, but you you start to explore the history, the geography, climatic conditions, the soil, and it gave me an opportunity to rediscover my own country and what's around
Oh,
me.
okay.
But not only do you learn all of that on a theoretical level, but you have a blind tasting glass in front of you. Take up the glass, give it a swirly swirl and a sniffy sniff, and you have that immediate connection between everything that's there to explore and to learn about the history of the country, the culture, the microclimatic conditions, the terroir. And here is a product that you can touch, that you can smell and taste, and suddenly everything makes sense.
Oh,
And
wow.
I hadn't had that experience previously because all I did was study, and it was all great theory on paper, on a screen. And it was then and there at the Wine and Spirit Education Trust where I understood this is what I love. To explore things on a sensory level whilst learning about all the rich cultural background was absolutely fascinating. So I took the biggest deep dive that I could possibly take and went all in and worked my way up to the advanced certificate at WSET, where I also explored spirits and fortified wines. And that became my true passion and vocation. So not only did I start giving lectures and seminars about spirits and fortified wines and wines in general, but I also started working as a bartender on the side. And I wanted to have a more hands-on experience with these products as well. And that again led me back into the hospitality industry. I started competing on a global level in bartending competitions. I
Oh, wow.
was the Austrian champion at Diageo's World Class for a couple of years in a row. Was representing Austria in the global finals, and all of that not only gave me a wonderful international network of the most accomplished professionals in the hospitality industry, but it also gave me the opportunity to join the American bar at the famous Savoy Hotel in London, where I was working as a bartender for a while, and then helped co-opening a gin craft distillery in the city of London. And I also worked for a consultancy company there, where we did consultancy work for people like Raymond Blanc, famous 3 Michelin-starred chefs, launched Vita Coco, co-launched Fever Tree in the UK, and all sorts of interesting stuff. And that sparked the entrepreneurial side in me and served as the inspiration for me to start my own company. So mostly because of my family and my grandmother, who I took care of until earlier this year. I went back to Austria, started my own company, and also co-opened a speakeasy and a boutique bar in Vienna. And that's been a very interesting journey for
Yeah, I'll
almost
say.
years. Yeah.
I mean, it seems very short-lived, Reinhard, because I don't know how old you are, but I know you're certainly younger than I am. But I mean, age sometimes has nothing to do with it. I mean, in very short order, you can accomplish a lot when you put your mind to it. Well, I want to get to your resume here a little bit more in a second. Just to go back, you said you were dealing with a pretty serious illness when you were around 20 years old. I mean, are you healthy now? Is everything okay? Like,
Oh,
so,
absolutely. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay, wonderful, wonderful. I didn't want to just glaze over that without like acknowledging that you said I had a pretty
No,
severe
no,
illness. I'm
I
like, okay.
appreciate it, and thanks for asking. But
uh,
it was
but
a very intense and, in the end, relatively short part of my life, but a very substantial one and a very important one. And I always say that I went through the most challenging times at a relatively early age. Some people either do that as part of a midlife crisis or probably never in life. And then, they might have regrets about certain things that they didn't do in life. And I'm done with all that shit, you know.
Hmm.
I've had plenty of bad and challenging experiences that ultimately made me who I am. And I profoundly believe that we learn through the most challenging times and experiences in our lives. And it's so very important to work on yourself and really, you know, without sugarcoating and without dressing things up, go to the core of it, address the issues we all have, and try to overcome them and learn from them. And as I said earlier, I mean, what it really did was it helped me realize who I am, what's important to me, which values do I hold dear in my heart and I want to perpetuate and nurture for the rest of my life. And all of that serves as inspiration and the foundation for whatever it is that I do now.
So you talked about how like one of the catalysts to this dark time of your life and everything was that you were in service to others, and then ironically you found yourself in service to others by coming back to the hospitality industry. What was it about the allure? It started with wine, and then but getting more into this bartending, into the bartending world that you described. Obviously, that's a lot more spirits and things like that too. Diageo
Yep.
owns everything. Um, so um, so obviously there was a connection to a greater world. It opened up the doors to this greater world. What did you find? Um, what did you find? What was the allure in the spirits world? That kind of gave you that refreshment not to wax poetic, but to your soul. Like what fed you the thing that you'd been missing in that world.
The realization that we work with Mother Nature, you know, it's a true handcrafted product. It's a product that speaks of its origin, where it comes from. And I, I mentioned earlier that I profoundly believe food and drink and cigars are by far the best way to explore other countries and cultures, because you immediately understand, you know, when you
Mm-hmm.
look at how and where and what the locals eat, you understand a culture and a country, and the way they drink as well, I believe. So for me, it was truly that combination of the sensory aspect of it, because I always love exploring new things, tasting, smelling, and combine that with whatever there is to be discovered in terms of where did that tradition come from? How, through the course of history, did certain types of spirits or fermented alcoholic beverages come about? And that's what always fascinated me. And the hospitality aspect, I would say, is another facet to that, where it's about sharing that experience with others
Mm-hmm.
and having the opportunity to introduce other people to what I had already discovered to be a delightful experience, and to bring that to others in the most loving and caring way was fascinating. And that's the one thing still to this day I think is the most important about hospitality. I don't think of hospitality as an industry or a job. I think of it as a way of life. And
Okay.
it's, you know, I think that hospitality is the greatest school of life, and it can serve as the inspiration and the philosophy for any industry out there, no matter what it is that you do, if you have that gene, if you have that underlying core principle of taking care of other people, welcoming them, and trying to make them feel at home and make them feel at ease, you're off to a winning start. And so that was a big part of my later work as a consultant,
Hmm.
is to apply those core principles of the hospitality industry to other fields of expertise, to primarily the luxury world, luxury goods world, and other industries where service might play a pivotal role. But in some instances, they wouldn't even think about it. I mean, I worked as a consultant for a very well-known international law office, and they wanted to redesign their customer journey. So everything from the moment you enter the building, the way you're welcomed at the reception desk, the type of coffee you're served whilst you're waiting in the meeting room for the lawyer to come and see you. And God knows that's an unpleasant experience and nothing anybody would look forward to. But to have the foresight and the vision and the understanding to say, we want to do this right from the first moment you get in contact with our company to the very last interaction you have with us and far beyond, we need to tailor that experience and try to apply certain tools of the trade and certain rules of hospitality in order to be successful on the long term as a business.
So this, I'm what you're describing in essence is your business that you started in 2019, which was the Pohorec sensory experience, right? And I mean, everything you just talked about is basically in the title of your company's name. Sensory, right? It's about those five senses, the way the way that you're heard, the way that you taste and smell and what you see and all those things. And um I was reading up a little bit about your company, and I was really fascinated by that the way that you approached it. Like, even I'm paraphrasing here, so forgive me if I miss a sentence or two, but basically your main one of your main concepts is, whether someone's shopping online, goes into a store, goes into an office or anything like that, their first impression should be the lasting impression, and should be the one that is the very best. And I mean, that's certainly not a an unusual concept. Everyone talks about first impressions, but I think for much of the business world, so much attention is spent on a lot of things other than that first impression, which is interesting. So I think that that's a
I
really.
would certainly agree that the first impression is key, but it's every single step thereafter that's just
Mhm.
as important. So I don't believe in the concept of trying to impress on the first impression, and then whatever, we did our job, tick
Right.
the box, and now help yourselves. No, I think it goes far beyond that, and I would even take a step back, or make a point before that. It's For me, what's even more important is the underlying way of thinking and the core principle that you apply first. You have to come from a loving and caring heart, and you have to fundamentally love taking care of other people and trying to do the very best for them. And everything else is a consequence. I
Mm.
think ever so often, and today more than ever, we think in a very transactional way, and we always look for opportunities or what's in it for me. which kind of advantage could I possibly take from the other side? What could I gain in that equation and that conversation? Whereas I think that hospitality mindset is way more about, like, think of it not in hospitality industry terms, like, you want to make money by people coming to your restaurant or your bar. I think of it as, you are my guest at home.
Hmm.
Bear Duplessis comes to me and I open my doors and I want to treat you to the very best cigars that I can find in my humidors. I'll pour you the finest wines that I have in my cellar, and I'll cook the best meal for you that I can, no matter how simple and humble it might be. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it comes from here because I want you to be my guest, to be at my home, and to feel like royalty because we're together and we're treasuring the moment.
Yeah.
That to me is that hospitality mindset. It's
Yeah.
we spend time together. You're my guest, and I want to take care of you in the very best way that I can. And and then, everything else follows and could be or could not be. It's not important.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting what you said about it, everything else has a consequence. And I mean, the word consequence certainly has like has a dire meaning to it. It could mean, but at the same time, like that's a really strong way of looking at it. You know, the from like you said, from the first impression to the moments after, the lasting impression, if you will. Each has a consequence to it, and that doesn't necessarily mean life or death or anything. Like I said, consequence can be very dark, but it it changes the whole dynamic about how you go about doing business.
Maybe
And
consequence is the wrong word that I used.
no, I think it's a
What
good word. I think it's well intentioned. I think that's the
what I
difference.
meant is, everything else can follow or can come from that. It's about the core principle first and doing the right things,
Mm-hmm.
and then let it flower, let it flourish, let it blossom. And sometimes you realize that this is going to be a friend for the rest of your life, and sometimes you part ways, and that's just fine as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you end up doing business with certain people, and sometimes you don't. And either option is fine because it really doesn't matter anymore because you did the best you can and you invest yourself into something, and then depending on how the other side reacts and how the whole situation and the conversation and the relationship evolves, you know, it can go different
Mm-hmm.
different ways. But I truly fundamentally believe that it's about the intention first and coming from a loving and caring heart.
Yeah, I agree because I think, and I don't, I wasn't begrudging the word of consequence. I think it is apropos because I think the every moment has its consequence, and like you said, if you pour your heart and soul into that one moment, it can foster and blossom into another moment, and then into another moment, and so on. And then if it doesn't, it doesn't. But you can look back on that one singular moment and say, that was a beautiful time, nevertheless. I I think it's interesting because the words that you're speaking and everything, Reinhard, because I know your company, you've worked with some very, very prestigious brands. When you think and companies, and these are powerful and influential, and when you talk about branding, I mean, alone, these are some like from GQ, BMW, Diageo, Chivas, Remy Martin, the Ritz Carlton, Porsche, even Davidoff. You've worked with all these brands, and there's many more. Those were the ones that were the most recognizable to me, that kind of stood out and everything. Um, you know, I mean, those are some fabulous relationships that you've been able to cultivate out of simple but beautiful hospitality. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know even along the journey, you realize that some people or companies truly understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to offer them. And for some, it might be a more short-term transactional business way of thinking where they got me on board to work on a certain aspect of their business or to create an event format for them or create a certain concept for one of their hospitality outlets or whatever it might be. And then sometimes with big corporations, you also realize there's a guy with an Excel spreadsheet and the red marker at at the very end, and all he cares about is the bottom line. And then that's probably not the right partner for me, or I allowed myself the privilege with my company to just say no to certain customers or people who wanted to do business with me. And especially after I had gained a certain exposure and experience and developed my portfolio, I took the liberty to decline certain offers and because I didn't believe in their core philosophy and principles and where they wanted to go. And in the hospitality industry, for example, you always experience that when you work with large five-star hotel brands, you want to take care of your guests, and then sometimes a beautiful idea and concept is undermined by somebody in the finance department who doesn't have the patience to let a concept blossom,
Mhm.
and all they care about is the money. And I mean, we this is the prime example of you stick to your values and you
Mhm.
do the things that are right for the long term because you have a generational legacy and company to take care of.
Mhm.
And then there's no sacrifices, there's no shortcuts, and you don't always worry about the quick buck, but you think long term
Right.
and you build something that's going to be relevant, important, and beautiful for generations to come and not look good on your next quotas statement.
Well, I think what's really beautiful about what you've created, Reinhard, and you may have had this foresight, maybe you are humble enough to have not seen it, but just talking about it out loud to you and seeing some of the companies that you've worked with, these are large corporations. Like to your point, they much of their focus is at the bottom line, but every so often, right, they can bring in somebody like you. You have the luxury and the opportunity to not be to be the hired gun and to help foster and kind of bring them back to, again, I'm waxing poetic here, but bring them back to humanity a little bit and to have them truly focus on what is really important, which is the people, whether that's their employees or their customers or both. And I think that's wonderful that you fostered these relationships and you have the opportunity to do that, because I think as as we as a society become more global and more corporate, let's be frank, um, there's a lot more dehumanization that occurs because all they're looking at is the Excel spreadsheet, to use your metaphor. Well, it's not really a metaphor; they actually do. Um, but I think it's a beautiful thing what you've created. And it's
But what
created a really great freedom for you too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
um, to your point, yes, absolutely. But I just wanted to add that sometimes you also realize along the way that you go in with the best intentions, and then probably they deviate from that path and want to go in a different direction, and
Oh, I'm sure.
sometimes that's okay as well, right? Um, Another aspect is there's all these fluffy marketing terms when people talk about employer branding nowadays, and they want to dress up the bride um, as their own company in order to still have a shot at getting some good talent into the company. And so, you know, I think it was primarily like companies like Google and other companies in Silicon Valley that truly started to look after their people. But you don't look after your people by setting up a ping pong table in the Mensa or offer organic farm grown food for lunch for free, or implement some other corporate program that looks good on paper, and talk is cheap, but it goes far beyond that. And if you still treat your people like shit, and everybody yells at each other, and it's a poisonous environment within the company, but you write employer branding like this all across your webpage, and oftentimes that doesn't quite match. So I think, yes, you're right. We see an ever-changing, fast-paced world where things are always on the move. Everything is digital, online, and we sometimes forget what's truly important on a human level. And at the same time, we're trying to be cognizant of that, and companies are trying to greenwash that a little bit and tidy it up.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's very simple, and it's walk the walk and look after your people and try to do the right thing rather than trying to dress it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, I've unfortunately seen, firsthand in some cases too, where um, when things are good, it's easy to, it's easy to I'm going to use the term for a third time tonight, wax poetic about company culture and, a people first culture and things like that, and do some of the things you described, the ping pong table and stuff like that, and to do those extras. And it's easy when times are good. It's when times are bad and the bottom line isn't looking as large as it once was and everything, and where that's where it gets tested, and that's where the rubber meets the road, as they say. And um I think that a lot of people can learn from that. There's a lot of large companies out there that do a very good job with doing what you do. And I think for most part, what's great about what's your, like I said, your concept is you're able to, your company is the concept is you're able to go in and give them guidance that they can take, and whether you're employed for a short time or not, or on a project or two, hopefully that's something they can carry on, and that you can really, really spread the goodwill to a lot of different places. So I think that's
Mhm.
great. It's also created a lot of freedom for you. I mean, this is your company, but you also it's interesting. I saw that, on your LinkedIn page, you're currently employed or currently working on like several different things. You're still depressed. Everything is still to present. Everything's still to present. I was like, man, he's got so many irons in the fire. You were able to, you started contributing to Cigar Journal in 2019, and you're still doing that. And then of course COVID hits in 2020, and that's when you launched Light 'em Up Lounge. Um, was that was that the result of COVID? Was that something you wanted to, or was that something you had been working on for a while?
I had been working on the concept for a while before that, and COVID just changed the way it was delivered in the end.
Hmm.
I initially wanted to start a podcast under the name Light 'em Up to offer a cigar platform with a more European voice, because there's fantastic shows in the US like yours. Um, and there's a couple that are
You're too kind.
fantastic, but there's very few and well, hardly any in Europe or the international markets. So I wanted to do something along those lines. Um, but COVID hit, everybody's locked down, and I, again, going back to the hospitality
Mindset.
tick
Yeah.
in my brain, I thought, well, how can I continue hosting people and bringing people together, forging relationships, building bridges? And that's when I thought about doing a virtual bar or a virtual lounge for people to hang out and engage with each other.
Okay.
That's why I changed the format from a podcast to a virtual lounge where people could gather together, still enjoy a cigar with each other, enjoy a conversation. And I just happened to bring along people from the industry. And our first ever guest on the first show that we did was Fred van der Marlière. And then we had Klaas Kellner and we had Heiko from Henk. And suddenly, people from all over the world were watching and joining us. And in the following weeks, we had the icons of the industry as our guests, and a whole new world opened up,
Hmm.
and the rest is history. So it truly became a world of its own and a fantastic community where people met online, and nowadays they travel all across the world to sit down with each other and have a cigar. One of our dear friends and regulars, Brian Julian, he joins the show on a weekly basis, and he lives in Orange County. Um, and it was last year after the trade show, I hosted an event in Napa Valley with Eric from Napa Cigars. And Brian jumped into the car and he drove something like 7 hours north just to come and see me and meet me in person. And then we sat side by side next to each other at 11 in the morning hosting the show. And, months later, I'm in Dubai. It's 11 at night. I'm looking at Burj Khalifa hosting another show with a good friend of mine who happened to be one of our guests before that. And so it's all those wonderful stories and relationships that came out of it. Besides the fact that in a very short period of time, I was privileged and blessed to meet the the most influential people in tobacco and cigar world, and it gave me a wonderful opportunity to connect with them on a very personal and meaningful level, like
Hmm.
we do here. And yeah, it's mind blowing what happened ever since we started.
Awesome. I want to tap more into this. So we want to get into a couple of what of our we call our fun segments. We kind of break up the show here a little bit. And then I want to come back to this because your journey more prevalently into cigars, we've talked about a lot about hospitality and your journey in your life growing up in Vienna and stuff, but there's a huge part of it, obviously, with it being cigars that brought you here to my show and me to your show first. So we'll get into that. So tonight's um this is our our U.S. presidential trivia segment, which is always brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the Firecracker, and the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. Now, I don't imagine you studied much U.S. history in your schooling there in Vienna, Reinhard, but this one is slightly related to you, so you may or may not know it, and it is multiple choice, so don't fret too much. So tonight's question is: who was the first U.S. president to visit your home country of Austria? And I have a hint ready for you if you want it, but I'll give you the answers, multiple choice. So, was it A, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, B, William Howard Taft, C. John F. Kennedy, or D. Woodrow Wilson? And I'm fully prepared to give you a hint if you want it.
Please do.
Okay, so the hint is resulting from this visit earned this president the Nobel Peace Prize.
Huh.
So Franklin Delano Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, John F. Kennedy, or Woodrow Wilson?
It's embarrassing, man.
It's not embarrassing, Reinhard. There are people in this country that don't know the answer. So
Well, I'll take a guess. Wilson?
you got it. That's it. Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, it was actually his visit to Austria during and a lot of Europe during post World War One. This is when he was trying to form the League of Nations. So, and it was resulting in World War One peace talks that eventually earned him the Nobel Peace Prize. So, even though he was considered a failure in his home country, because well, he formed the League of
Very cool
Nations.
question.
Yeah, the United States wasn't a member, believe it or not. So crazy.
Beautiful
Crazy.
question.
Yeah.
And to your point, I couldn't say that I studied American history to the extent that I would love to, but I was always fascinated by American history, and I wrote my final thesis about the American dream and
Wow.
the historical idea of the American dream, or how it actually came together, going all the way back to the Puritans coming from Europe over
Oh yeah.
to American shores with the fundamental idea and belief of creating a better life for themselves and building something better than where they came from, and how that over time sort of trickled into what later on became the American dream, and what was somehow framed in the also later on the Declaration of Independence and all the constitutional core principles. So I love that, and I think it very much resonates with my own journey and the things that I have experienced in life. And I know it might sound very cliche and overly idealistic, but I'm a diehard optimist, and I fundamentally believe in the good in other people, and so that always resonated with me.
That's awesome.
Oddly enough,
It's
it was roughly around the time I smoked my first ever cigar. So when I turned 18, I, without any previous exposure or any previous influence from my family or friends, I I put on a black suit and tie. I went to a local American bar and smoked my first ever cigar and had my first ever cocktail,
okay.
because there was something so appealing about the whole idea and the lifestyle. And it was a dimly lit bar with all the wooden patios, and there was Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin playing in the background, and all these crazy fancy cocktails. And I was sitting there smoking my first cigar and feeling like a king.
That's
And still
beautiful.
to this day, I treasure that idea. And yeah, there's something so appealing about it. And only later on, I discovered the depth and the many layers of what is a cigar, a handmade premium cigar, and the industry that's behind it. So that gave me, of course, a totally different perspective and love and passion for the industry and the people they're in. But it was that very beautiful, idealistic first idea that initially brought me to the dance.
That's awesome. That's very funnily enough, I was talking about my trip home last week, and my mom and I were talking about my first experience with a cigar, and she's like, whatever else. And I've recanted this before on my show, but she really didn't know the origin of it, and I was very similar to you. It just, I there was an allure to it from a very young age. I wanted to light up a cigar, and I had no interest in cigarettes. I had no interest in other forbidden fruits, if you will. But there was something about a cigar that I just really was drawn to. And my 18th birthday, not as regal of an experience as yours, but still still very marquee in my life.
That's
Lighting up my
beautiful.
first cigar and enjoying it. And and I think it was, you got to live what that thought was for me as a youth. I wanted that wood paneled room, classic, classic Americana playing on the speakers, and in a suit kind of thing. So that's what I dreamed of, and that's cool. That's so ironic that you got to live that as your first cigar experience. So that's really beautiful. You know, I'm again kind of going back to your education. I'm always fascinated by the lack of the American education in terms of bilingual. We're taught English and not very well, as a whole. But then I meet people from abroad like yourself who speak English incredibly well.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
how many languages do you speak?
German is my mother tongue. I learned English very early on, even though my English teachers were all horrible, and I was bad at English for a long time, but it was my professional career that helped me with that. I learned Latin in school
Oh
and
wow,
French.
French. Okay,
So
yeah.
Latin you don't really speak, but I still treasure the experience of having learned Latin in school because especially in combination with French and English. Um,
Yeah.
I don't speak Italian, neither do I speak Spanish, but I can sort of understand both, and I can
Hmm.
I can read both semi decently because with that hodgepodge and mix of Latin and French, I can somewhat figure out my way around it. And I used to be very good in French. I'm not fluent anymore. Obviously our Meerapfel office helps me practice and it gets me back into it a little more. But I wish I was better at it. But it's like everything in life, if you don't practice it regularly, it's difficult. And 99% of my work is international in English, so
Right.
it became the
They're
primary
Bel
language.
they're Belgian, right? Jeremiah and the Meerapfels are Belgian,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah, our head office is based in
Yeah.
Braine-l'Alleud, just outside of Brussels and Waterloo, funnily enough, speaking about history.
And this is going to sound so ignorant to me when I listen to you speak and I listen to Jeremiah speak, the English accent when you speak English, when both y'all speak English, you seem to have a very similar accent with it.
Okay.
Um, which is interesting because neither of your mother tongues are the same. So you come from a German background, he comes from French. So that's interesting. Um,
Even though Jeremiah's background is so diverse and
yeah,
multilingual as well, and he was born in the US, so
that's true. Yeah. Um, but it's always fascinating to me the when international folks that I've gotten to know over the years, and their English is often better than mine or better than most people I know. But it's great that you have it. I grew up around England. I grew up on the border of Texas and Mexico, so Spanish was what I was engrossed in quite a bit. but it was the worst part of it because it was this combination. I called it Spanglish. It was this English Spanglish combination, and it was awful. Because it was just basically speaking Spanish until you couldn't come up with the Spanish word anymore, and you just came up and you just interjected English into it, or vice versa, and it was just awful. And so that's why I never put bilingual on my resume, because I'm not. And I never try to I never try to hold a conversation in Spanish. You can speak Spanish to me and I understand it very well, and I can read it very well, but I cannot speak it very well at all. Same with French. I studied French in school, and I can read it. I can read it incredibly well. I used to be able to write it decently well, but speaking it was always hard. So,
However, I learned, especially during international travels, that we all speak one fundamental language of caring for each other, and if you have an open heart and mind, and you travel to places where you don't speak the language, there's always ways to communicate and understand each other,
mhm.
and over a good glass of whatever local schnapps or moonshiner they have, and a good cigar, we always find a common language, and I very much enjoy that.
My good our good friend Allison of the show, she said I spoke Texas borderer. Yeah, that's true. Texas borderer. There we go. That's the language I was fluent in as a child. Well, good. Well, that was our. I know we kind of went off a little bit. That was our presidential trivia segment. But to get back, this is a perfect segue back into what we were talking about. So this all these opportunities that you created through your hospitality business and venture, you found your way into cigars with the Light 'em Up Lounge, this concept that you'd been building, and took off during COVID because no one was allowed to do anything. And so I think it gave us all a lot of opportunities. I got to do interviews with people that, a few months or even a couple of years prior would have been very difficult to, not because, they're difficult people, they're just incredibly busy. And suddenly everyone was a lot less busy. And so you got the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, which was really great.
Sure.
And so it kind of fostered these beginnings for you too. When did you first meet Jeremiah and Meerapfel, and develop this relationship with the family? And that's ultimately, we're going to obviously talk about one of your current positions right now, but when did that relationship start?
First thorough conversation that I had with Jeremiah was live on the air at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
Oh, okay.
And I can't tell you what it was, but I sat there, and from the very beginning, through an incredibly inspiring 2 hours conversation, all the way to the very end, where Mr. Meerapfel, as I used to call him during the show, then said, "Please call me Jeremiah." And I somehow realized then and there that there was an incredible human being sitting in front of me who I had an incredibly deep connection with, even though we hadn't met in person yet. But something clicked, and I fundamentally understood that we come from the very same values, and that we treasure certain things and certain beliefs and values in our lives that are beautifully aligned. And so it immediately formed a connection and a very strong foundation for everything that we have built ever since. And that to me is fascinating, and again, sort of a tribute to everything that we discussed previously. But initially, it was it was the live show that that brought us together.
That's awesome. I've met some very dear friends of mine doing this show. Miguel Chodell, the national sales manager for Crowned Heads, I met
What
for
a
the very
great
first
guy.
time. Yeah, I met for the very first time doing an interview, and we shared our passion of presidential trivia. that was that was one of the things, and baseball. Those were the two things we talk about quite a bit and stuff. And it's it's incredible, like you said, even though that we're visiting digitally and everything, but the great equalizer that cigars are, or spirits, and all these other, these opportunities in places that you found yourself in, how they create this natural environment for people to truly connect with one another. and
Yeah.
and Jeremiah is one of the more fascinating people that I've ever heard speak, and his father's story, his family's story is, I mean, it's something almost out of, not quite as violent and tragic as Greek mythology, but it's pretty darn close. Like it's pretty darn epic. Um
I haven't
and
heard the analogy before, but I think you're spot on, Bear.
right. And to your point, I remember I was like, "Oh, Mr. Meerapfel." I said the same thing. I addressed him as Mr. Meerapfel. He's like, "Please, it's Jeremiah." And um there are certain people in this industry that I've addressed by last name, and they're very quick to correct me and tell me to address them by their first name, because again, that's the kind of community that we are. But he's certainly one of them. Um I really, one of the truly beautiful stories that I think came out of COVID was that family story, because I think very few consumers knew, especially in this country, being, the United States. Maybe it was similar in Europe. You could probably comment on that, Reinhard. But I think very few consumers knew the impact and the significance of the Meerapfel family and what they did um, for the American cigar culture, and manufacturing, and everything as well. So I think it was
Even go beyond that, and I would say for the history of tobacco throughout the
mhm,
centuries,
yeah.
because when you look back, I mean, all the crossroads and all the paradigm shifts in the tobacco and cigar industry that you could possibly think of, the Meerapfel family was there in some way or another, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just mind-boggling how the family has been behind the scenes of the industry, oftentimes quintessentially involved with creating some of these paradigm shifts or helping the industry to grow and evolve. But to your point, it's absolutely true that to the end consumer, the Meerapfel name still today oftentimes is a mystery. And I think that's what Meerapfel cigar now truly has as one of its core missions, is to share some of that rich family history and legacy with the world through the means of an actual cigar.
Absolutely. Um, and through that point, and to that point, I think um, I think that's what's incredible about that story. Like you said, that the tobacco in its essence is the history of tobacco. They've been there, and it allowed them to launch a brand. Another name comes to mind, not born from COVID, but born recently, and because you mentioned his name earlier too, Nestor Andres Plasencia. For decades, that family was a huge part of the fabric of this industry, manufacturing cigars, growing tobacco, cultivating tobacco, and they were in large part very much a part of this industry, just like the Meerapfel family. And when they launched their own brand, I think it finally gave the world a glance at the significance that they did, and they, whether you call it a precursor or not, that I think that gave when the Meerapfels announced this project that they were coming out with their own brand, like there was no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a success, because they had the opportunity to kind of announce themselves to the world thanks to COVID. And I think that they became a lot more prominent than that, and they built relationships like with you and others and so forth. They kind of put a spotlight on them a little bit more, and they were able to launch a significant brand. And so let's talk about the Ernst that I'm smoking. I actually finished the first one. I've lit up my second one. This is a fantastic blend. I mean, truly, truly gorgeous. The aroma, like I mentioned before, is very clean, subtle. There's not too much spice to it. The smoke is very cool and has a wonderful earthy, balanced creaminess to it. So I get some nice baking spices. I get some nice earth to it.
You always find a little like oriental spice note coming through with Ernst, and just a touch of salty, briny minerality that elevates the entire experience and gives it those lovely but very nuanced top notes. So it's like gently dancing on top of everything else, and adding to the layers of complexity of that blend in particular.
I love minerality in a blend. I think when there's a touch of it, as long as it's not overwhelming, it really balances out a really cohesive blend. And then on the faint finish for me on the retrohale, just the faint finish, there's a little spicy licorice that's like a perfect accent to this concept of flavor.
And since you mentioned the retrohale, what strikes me is how incredibly delicate and beautifully textured the retrohale on the Meerapfel cigars in general is. It's like baby powder. It's talky, it's soft, it's gentle, rich, but in the most elegant and refined way. It's sometimes you feel when you retrohale a cigar, you try to, and just at the very beginning, you're like, oh, I'm in for a ride here, and it's like that rake coming through your nostrils. Whereas here, it's like velvet,
Yeah,
the
there's
most gentle of touches, and still rich at the same time. Fascinating.
I like a lot. I mean, I like strong cigars. I used to be a very full, I kind of went when I first started in cigars. I very quickly went through lighter cigars and got to full bodied and stayed there for a while. Like I was into stronger, bolder cigars. And then as my palate developed more and more, I started to appreciate more milder and medium bodied cigars for
Fair.
all the
Let me ask you
nuances.
something, and I'm sorry if I interrupt you, but
No, it's please.
I'm always curious when people talk about full bodied, right? What are we actually talking about? Do you enjoy the nicotine impact and the strength, or are we just talking about layers and layers of aromatic nuances and impact on the taste, a rich body and mouthful where it's luscious, it's rich on your palate? Because I think that ever so often we get confused with the terminology, and the
1,000%.
the number one question when you walk in the humidor is oftentimes, well, do you like mild, medium, or full body? And I'm like, yeah, what does that mean to you, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And to me, I think there's three distinct yet confused topics. There's mild, medium, and full flavored. There's mild, medium, and full strength, and there's mild, medium, and full bodied.
Mhm.
And for what I was speaking a moment ago, I got into the full-bodied, full strength. I wanted power and I wanted intensity, all the time. That was me very early on in my smoking and career. And as my palate developed, I I really sought out more nuance, and it didn't matter the intensity of it. So to get to your point, I think that I always want a full flavored, a medium or full flavored cigar, something that has very pronounced and distinct flavors. It's not just very bland characteristics, but the intensity of smoke, the body, um, of flavor to me is very and very confusing with strength. Strength is, I think, I associate with the level of nicotine, like how it impacts you. So the strength level doesn't mean as much to me as much as the intensity of flavor. But I can appreciate now. I can appreciate more medium bodied intensity in cigars, and I think this is a very full flavored cigar. I think it's medium to full in intensity in terms of boldness, and I think and strength. So I think those two coincide. But it's a
And
excuse me, it's a full flavored experience. Pardon me.
I would like to add to that that it's probably the biggest one of the big challenges when creating that cigar experience is to find that equilibrium and to find that sweet spot where you have complexity, richness, a full body, and the
Hmm.
luscious mouthfeel, but at the same time have the balance and the finesse and the elegance
Hmm.
without the nicotine hammer hitting you over the head. Because
Yeah.
I don't enjoy if the cigar hits me with nicotine. I'm not in it for the buzz or a nicotine kick. I want to experience the aromatic nuances and the rich, luscious taste profile. And of course, given how Mother Nature works, um, heavy textured tobacco will give you the qualities of aromatic impact and strength, and it will also give you the nicotine impact.
Hmm.
But it's truly about the way you work the tobacco, whether it's in the fermentation. Of course, it very much comes down to the time you allow the tobacco to rest and age thereafter as well. Where ultimately, with all these variables and all these different ingredients, you create the final dish, and you have all these instruments that have to play together to create the
Hmm.
symphony. But uh, to put that balance above everything else, I think another person that speaks about this very eloquently and elegantly is Michael Herklotz, and I saw he commented on the stream earlier. So kudos to him as to how he beautifully expresses that and
Hmm.
also translates that into his cigar experiences. But that, I believe, is one of the core challenges in creating a successful blend and an elevated cigar experience is to deliver on the aromatic and taste profiles, but in a very balanced and harmonious way.
Yeah, I think elegance is a word that um, is underutilized and abused at the same time in this industry. Because the reason I say underutilized is I think that there are very elegant and non-elegant blends, and that doesn't mean that that's not an insult to the non-elegant blends. That's not what they are. Um, and the reason I say that it's abused is there's this kind of overarching um, use of the word elegance when associating it with a cigar experience, um, and I think that's just not always the case. But but I think it's underutilized in the sense that um, there are elegant blends, and this is certainly one of them because of all the nuance and this very nuanced but crystallized journey that we're having with the cigar smoking experience. And I know we're smoking two different cigars, so I am taking that into account. But it's from my perspective, it's it's an incredibly balanced, nuanced journey that has very distinct flavor profiles that I'm truly enjoying. And I think that was definitely taken into account into the blending process.
And it's
So,
also an underlying core philosophy throughout the Meerapfel cigar range, because it's just who the family are, and
mhm,
it speaks very much to their history, to their origin, and the authenticity of the family, was at the same time offering something to the cigar industry that you probably don't find in many of the other brands out there. And that goes all the way from the design and the packaging, the communication aspect, and of course the tobacco and the cigar experience. Um, there's something quintessentially old European about Meerapfel cigar in every aspect of the delivery that I find intriguing, but it's just a natural consequence of who they are and the
mhm.
family history and origins, right? And authenticity is another word that's highly abused and overused. But here it beautifully applies. And we're smoking two different master blends, but they they tell one cohesive story, and they're clearly identifiable as being part of one family. However, two very distinct expressions, given that they represent different family generations and family members. So I'm smoking Meir, the great great grandfather, who in the late 1800s established the first Meerapfel cigar factory in Germany. He grew tobacco in Germany and eventually had this dream and idea of creating his own Meerapfel cigars with his very own tobacco rolled by his very own people. But Mayor Meerapfel was an impeccably dressed, well spoken, old school gentleman, late 19th century. He was a philosopher, a spiritual leader of his time, a rabbi, a founding member of the social democratic movement in Germany. And hence, the Meir Master Blend perfectly encapsulates that with an incredible depth and complexity, but in the most refined, elegant way. I always say smoking a Meir is like sitting next to your mentor or sitting next to your grandfather. And when you have a conversation, you realize that this gentleman has seen it all, heard it all, experienced it all, and he has all the experience in life. So he speaks with such profound impact, and there's depth and meaning to every single word. Yet it's all delivered with a calm, deep voice and a loving and caring demeanor.
Mhm. It's
Whereas you're smoking the Ernst Master Blend, Mayor's son, who was an adventurer at heart. So he left the safety and the his well-known surroundings of the village in Untergrombach, and he sailed to Indonesia, which back then was a tremendous undertaking and adventure, where I believe I mentioned it earlier. He discovered Sumatra tobacco in Indonesia. He brought back some of the Sumatra seed to Europe, but his adventurous nature is at the core of the blend that you're smoking. Hence, these oriental spice notes that we spoke about earlier,
Mhm.
and that salty, briny minerality coming through. It's almost as if you were standing on the boat together with Ernst, and you have some of that seawater splashing in your face and elevating that experience. And it's so fascinating to me how you can clearly see them perfectly coming together under the overarching family umbrella, yet giving you those distinct iterations of one cohesive theme and profile. And of course, with the vintage Cameroon wrapper sort of tying it together as the family's sacred leaf, but then the blend offering you very distinct experiences so you can travel in time and you can explore these different eras and the different personalities of the Meerapfel family, all expressed and translated into these distinct cigar experiences, is truly mind-blowing for me.
It's interesting the way you described Meyer, and the word how his words carried so much weight. And I'm sure that this was obviously recanted to you by Jeremiah. He has that same persona, and you can almost see it now. They're two completely different personalities, but you can see how the relationship from the Meerapfel family and the Fuente family kind of brought that together. Carlito has that same effect on people. His words, every syllable, you're hanging on every word that he says, and they're, don't get me wrong. Like I said before, they're two very distinct personalities, but they're that kind of weighted language is very prominent in both of them. And um, there are times when I'm like listening to other interviews and podcasts and stuff where I will listen through it and I will catch the good bits here and there, or they're like, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to hear more about that or something. There's something that always catches my ear. Um, and then there's very few times, and Jeremiah is a perfect example of it. Every interview that I've heard him do, I know he's done shows where he's been the interviewer, but on times when he's being the one that's spoken, man, it is must hear every single word. Like I am glued to that man's story, um and it's very beautiful that they've been able to come together and put it together and put it in together in these blends. The one blend we haven't mentioned was which was the original release, which is the Richard, which tell us a little bit, for those people who haven't had the opportunity or haven't heard much about that. Why don't you talk a little bit about the origin of that release?
Richard for sure was the most emotional release, not only because it was the first ever master blend we launched, but given the tragic historical implications of Richard Meerapfel's passing way too early in the early 2000s, and how Jeremiah, being only 24 years of age back then, having to pick up the devastating pieces of of that tragic situation, with his father having just passed away. The family had just been expropriated from Central Africa and Cameroon. And we see this repeatedly throughout history and throughout the Meerapfel history, where the family lost everything, had to build back from scratch, and against all odds, tried to perpetuate the family legacy. So there's so much on an emotional level which ties into the creation of the entire Meerapfel cigar dream and vision. And of course, the Richard Master Blend being the first rendition of that, seeing the light of day, that it's, it's very hard to even talk about it, or funnel it down to a couple of core elements and points. But in terms of the experience, I think it's an incredible combination of the things that Richard Meerapfel would have enjoyed,
Mhm.
and his experiences in Cuba, and the cigars from the Cuba of yesteryears that he had enjoyed throughout his life, in combination with the incredible relationships he forged with the Fuente family, and his accomplishments in Cameroon with Cameroon Tobacco. All of that makes for an incredibly complex mix and cocktail of emotions and qualities that are encapsulated in the Richard Master Blend. So it's emotional, and even for me,
Here's
it's very hard to grasp and sort of take it all in. But that's just how I feel about it, and I hope that it also translates when people savor one of these creations, and they light up one of the cigars.
it's a deep responsibility. It feels like, like just
Yeah.
hearing you talk about it. I mean, this is not your family. This is not your history, but it's a very powerful one. And it's a very powerful story, and it's one that you've obviously not just gravitated toward, but really enveloped. And I think I think what's ultimately going to lead to the worldwide success of Meerapfel is the tapping into that story and finding people like yourselves who will invest in that story and be prepared to tell it. Um, because I mean, it's like you said, there's it's it's an epic saga, like we were detailing earlier, and it's a very rich history, and it's one worth telling. So um,
I
I'm
couldn't
I'm
agree more with you on the responsibility aspect of it. And I don't want to sound pretentious or presumptuous in any way when I speak about the family history in a certain way, given that, as you rightfully mentioned, it's not my family name or my family's history, but I feel such a deep responsibility for it as well, and such a deep connection, all based on the shared values and our European background, and certain things that we have experienced throughout our lives.
mhm.
Besides the incredible relationship that I was privileged to forge with Jeremiah and Joshua and Melissa, that it means so much to me, and I feel such tremendous pride and responsibility in relaying that, and sharing that with the world.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And thank you so much for the kind gift of these cigars. I am enjoying them immensely. It's been a wonderful evening so far. We have a few more questions before we conclude our evening. We continue kind of with our fun segments, as I like to say. Um, and just getting to know you a little bit more. And we'll kick things off with our next segment, which is brought to you by Artista Cigars, which is truly the last hidden gem of the Dominican Republic. With nearly 70 years of rolling cigars, the family behind Artistas believe in honoring their long heralded and held family traditions of handmade artistry. Artista's blends include factory exclusive tobaccos and front marks for every budget. In fact, Cigars has one of the most varied portfolios on the market today. There's something for everyone in Artista cigars. Now, if you're like me and you can never decide on what to smoke, Artista Cigars is a breath of fresh air because you can literally take something from any box Artista has to offer, and you know you're getting something special. So with that note, this is the this or that segment, Reinhardt. So this is kind of meant to be like a more rapid fire. So I'm going to give you two things, and you choose one. That's that simple. Some are cigar related. I threw some style, threw some travel in, and some deeper questions as well. So let's start
Lovely.
off easy. We'll go with cigars. Corona or Toro Vitolas?
Corona, all the way.
I like smaller ring gauges myself. I'm with you. A Maduro or natural wrapper?
Very much depends on the mood, but probably a natural. Even though you could make a point that Cameroon always has a slightly darker hue to it, you wouldn't necessarily call it a Maduro.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let me choose, give me Cameroon.
Nice. I mean, I imagine you weren't. I mean, what I there's parts of European cigar history that I'm not always keen on, and I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. You would know more than I. I feel like the Maduro exposure in Europe was probably not as much as it is in the United States up until recently. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and that's definitely also a consequence of the predominance of Cuban cigars in the European and international markets up until relatively recently, when more of the non-Cuban cigars have found their place in the international community as well. And again, going back in history, I think that besides Davidoff, when they made the shift to the Dominican Republic, it was truly the Fuente and the Meerapfel family with Don Carlos blend, to give one prime example, to sort of open the gates for cigars from the Dominican Republic or other manufacturing countries in the international markets.
Interesting. So, let's go to spirits and wines. Let's talk about wine for a second. French or Austrian wine?
Tough. Austrian, even though the a creamy white Burgundy, there's nothing else that could probably beat it. But we have beautiful Burgundy-esque wines in Austria as well. And I'm more of I love rich, velvety white wines more than anything. And we have fantastic versions in Austria. Some of our autochthonous grape varietals like Grüner Veltliner, stunning.
I confess I need to get more into Austrian wine. I know that there are beautiful prominent grapes and vintages grown there. I need to get more into Austrian wine. Going over to spirits though, cognac or scotch?
Cognac.
My man. I am a cognac person. I absolutely love it.
I had the privilege of traveling to Cognac many, many times. I'm an official cognac educator with the Bureau National Interprofessionnel du Cognac. So I have a profound love and affinity when it comes to cognac.
Oh, that's so
speaking about elegance and finesse, right there.
My favorite, I know that you've worked with Remy Martin specifically on the Louis the 13th brand. I've never had the opportunity to have that, but I do love Remy Martin 1784 that's made for the American market. I think it's exquisite. Very good. All right, let's talk about style. I've got three questions here for you. Blazer or a dinner jacket?
I love my smoking jackets, That's pretty much all I wear.
There you go. I figured as much. like you're sporting now either an ascot or a tie?
Ascot.
Here's one I saw you where I saw you have on both right now. Cufflinks or watch or timepiece, however you call it.
I don't think that's an either or question. I only wear cufflinks, so I only wear shirts with cufflinks. Um, but I do like my watches.
What's
I
your
know
favorite watch?
technically you're not supposed to wear you don't wear a watch with a tuxedo, but I would still wear my watches with my smoking jackets.
Okay.
I think you have to look at the rules in order to bend them ever so slightly
There you
if you
go.
feel like.
Yeah, rules are made to be broken, right? What's your favorite watch that you
Especially
own?
when it comes to sartorial, you know, it's somewhat shocking and sad how not many people know dress codes and the old rules of the trade anymore. So I think unfortunately that's one of the evolutions of our time that you know to dress properly is not a sport for everybody anymore.
That is
So
true.
I would like to make a point in the statement that there are certain things to be treasured and to be perpetuated.
That's awesome. What's your favorite timepiece that you own?
Well, I have one that's very very dear to my heart, which I was presented with, and it's a very understated, luxurious timepiece that not many people know unless you're sort of deeply into watches. And it's a Japanese timepiece by a craftsman with the name of Hashimi Asaoka, and he makes incredible one-off watches that have incredible craftsmanship and also come with a hefty price tag. But he makes a certain line which is called Chrono Tokyo, um, where even though being very limited to oftentimes a few hundred pieces, and you have to register and sign up in order to be put on a list and be able to buy one. Um, it's his philosophy of making the highest level of watchmaking and craftsmanship accessible to a wider audience, but again, all done in very limited runs and exceptional craftsmanship, very understated. Again, not a lot of people would recognize the watch when you wear it, and it's not a big bulky watch. Based on the way that I like to dress, um, it's not appropriate to wear thick, heavy sports watches, but rather a more understated dress watch, and that very much fits into that profile.
It's beautiful. Yeah, there. One of the things I like about your style, Reinhard, is that it's for the American culture. To your point, like it you would say overdressed, but it's always very but it's
I'll
done the
take
way.
that any day of the week.
But at the same time, it's very understated. At the same time, like it's not ostentatious. Like it's not overdressed for the sake of overdressing. It's just it's very much a part of who you are, and it's clear that it's not a front either, which is what I like about it. Um,
Thank you.
so the what you describe about that timepiece definitely suits you, from my perspective. To go back to your country of Austria, let's talk about two cities that I've happened to be in, I've happened to venture to, and I think they're both beautiful. But Linz or Salzburg?
Salzburg, no question.
Um, would you rather plan and attend an event that you planned, or would you rather attend an event that you didn't plan?
For the sake of relaxation and enjoying, I'd rather go to somebody else's event. But I very much like the the creative process and the creation process of curating the experience and trying to think of every little component that the guests will enjoy and maybe don't even recognize, but it just makes for the beautiful overall experience and the holistic experience. So I love putting these things together, and even if it's small things, like to give you one example, every single one of our master blend has very detailed pairing recommendations for both alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, snack pairings, finger food, all the way to a full-blown multi-course Michelin starts menu. And we also have a playlist which you can find on Spotify for every master blend. So
Mhm.
I have curated a certain audio experience to perfectly accompany the various master blends and enhance the experience. And it's those little touches that I love about curating experiences.
A true sensory experience, it sounds like, which is your forte. Um, so as we mentioned briefly, you do contribute to Cigar Journal and have since
Mhm.
2019. So would you rather write an
Even
in-depth
before that, with LinkedIn, I'm not very tech savvy, so maybe some things get lost in translation there. But I've had the privilege to write for them for quite many years now, and I'm also part of the tasting panel, so
Mhm.
I get to try a very wide variety of different cigars from all different countries of origins through blind tasting process. And that to me is always highly fascinating. In general, I smoke all across the board. So even though I'm spoiled and I'm privileged to enjoy our Meerapfel cigars maybe more often than other people, I still love to explore and try different things, and I also think that it's very, very important to have a broad perspective of the industry in general. Recently, I took a very deep dive together with a lot of tobacco growers and manufacturers who allowed me the privilege of sampling pure grade individual leaves of tobaccos from all various different origins, different seed varietals, different primings. So, sort of an in-depth exploration of the raw material side of our industry. And yeah, a cigar journal for me is one way of channeling that into sharing the content and the learning experiences with the world as well.
So would you rather write an in-depth feature article or do a speaking engagement?
Ah, that's tough, you know. I love to get on stage or in front of people and deliver a speech, but there's something about the written word and the long format article that's equally charming. So, oh, tough to say. I love them both, but if I were to choose, then I'd jump on the podcast with you and ramble on for 2 hours.
There you go. And finally, our last question of Artista Cigars, this or that segment is taking you back to your school days, math or literature.
Oh, literature all the way.
Was there a favorite book of yours when you were a child that you enjoyed reading?
Hmm. Might sound stupid, but I had one favorite book, but that's going back to my very early childhood days. Um, I don't even know if there's an English translation for it, or what that would be called, but it was about a papa bear and his son, the little bear,
Hmm.
um, and the young bear. He just cannot fall asleep because they're in their cave,
Hmm.
and the little bear, he's always afraid of the darkness.
Oh my gosh, I have that book for my kids. I have
No
this book.
way.
I do. I have this book. Yeah,
You know
keep
what
going,
it's
please.
called in
I do.
English?
Uh, it, it, it's something trivial like little bear's scared of the dark or something. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, he
in
says,
German
and
it's
he,
something like can you not sleep, or can you not fall
yeah,
asleep, young
can you not
bear?
fall?
No.
And then he lights a candle, and then he lights this,
The
and then,
father brings him a little lantern,
hmm,
and then the little bear says, "Well, it's still too dark, and
hmm,
I'm afraid I can't sleep." And then Papa Bear brings him a bigger lantern, and an
hmm,
even bigger lantern and a
yeah,
bigger lantern, and
and
he
then he takes
still
him outside
can't
to the
fall
dark.
asleep.
Yeah,
He takes him outside to the
yeah,
dark, and then suddenly his eyes adjust, and he sees the full moon, and he
hmm,
sees the stars, and he sees the beauty of it all, and that there's really nothing to be scared of.
yeah,
And eventually, on the way home, he falls asleep on his Papa Bear's
hmm,
arms, and then at the end, they both lie on the couch
hmm,
sleeping. And,
yeah.
I love that book.
I have
It
that
was.
book. I've read it to my boys. That's awesome.
Oh, how sweet!
Oh,
I
that's so cool. Oh man, that's funny. Small world. Um, yeah, wow. Yeah, it's very profound in its simplicity, but it's a beautiful story. So yeah, that's great. Oh man, that's funny. All right. Well, let's go into our next segment, which is Everybody Eats, which is brought to you by Postania Cigars. If you always make sure that your serving style is bigger than your appetite, everybody will always get theirs. Postania Cigars is more than just great cigars made by cool people. They embody an attitude of gratitude and grit. With Postania, everybody eats. Um, so I
I want to congratulate you on your wonderful ad segments and the people that support your show, by the way, because
oh,
I
thank you.
Mike Shepankevich from Poshtani and Cigar Hustler. I think he's an incredible human being. He's a straight shooter. He's a very open and honest and sincere man, and the industry
Mhm.
needs more people like this. But we had Artista before that. I just saw Ram in Dortmund, and all wonderful people, and it speaks volumes about the diversity in our industry and
Mhm.
the wonderful human beings they're in. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to
Oh,
all
thank
these.
you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have the partners that I have, and I count Mike among my friends in the industry, and yeah, I could not come up with a better description for him than what you just said. So very very true. So um, but this segment is about eating. So what
Mhm.
is the most unique experience you've ever had at a dinner table?
Um, Full experience taken into account. The most emotional for me was probably dinner by Heston uh, at the Mandarin Oriental in Knightsbridge in London, because during my times in the hospitality industry and the bartending industry, Heston Blumenthal always served as a tremendous source of inspiration for me, and I loved his work. So dining at one of his restaurants for the first time for me was extremely emotional. It also happened to be on the final day of the World Class Global Finals, where I was representing Austria. And that very same day, I was awarded Sensory World Champion for one of the individual competitions in the global finals. And I remember every single dish. I remember how the starter was sourdough bread grilled with a ragu of pig's ears and it was all held together by an incredibly deep and rich Madeira jus. And it was so intense, it was so concentrated. The Madeira jus it could literally burn a hole right through your tongue. It was so intense and so delicious. And yeah, I can remember every
Oh,
single dish all the way to when they come with the trolley for the liquid nitrogen ice cream, and they whip up the ice cream a la minute right at your table and serve it to you in a little cone,
oh
which
wow.
is also made, of course. And just the whole experience, of course, the exhausting finals of world class, and then sitting in one of my idols' restaurants was very meaningful, very memorable.
That's beautiful.
But
Uh,
if I could choose one dining experience, I would always take my family table and just have a have a slice of our homemade potato bread, or I always make our own bread. I have a sourdough living with us for the last 5 years, and I always bake a loaf of normal spelt and rye sourdough bread for Christine, and I make a loaf of walnut bread for myself. And just a slice of that, enjoyed with family. There's nothing better.
that's beautiful. I spoke earlier about how Europeans do Christmas right. You guys also do bread right. Um, I
Agreed.
grew up I grew up in a family where bread was not served with dinner, which is I know is weird for most Europeans. But I also think it led to my experience later in life where I got to travel to Europe and I got to see what real bread tastes like and how beautiful it is. Um, that's awesome. So, all right. This
What I was
next,
really trying to say, I guess, is, you know, I can enjoy, and of course, who wouldn't, a multi-course Michelin-starred meal with full wine pairing and the whole opera and the incredible finesse and intricate composition of every single dish and the overall meal. But ultimately, I always come back to the most simplistic, humble, and honest handmade things. Or just this summer, Christine and I, we went to a little mountain shed in the Austrian Alps with no electricity, no phone reception. If you want to drink a coffee in the morning, you have to start the fire and you put the kettle on, and it takes
oh, that's
like half
awesome.
an hour until you can pour your first cup. And then you go out into the forest and you go hiking, and you find all these beautiful chanterelle mushrooms and wild berries. And a couple meters down the hill, there's a farmer who has cows, and you get some raw milk from them. And it's things like that you know nothing in the world can beat that, because it's so true and honest, and you strip away all the fluff and all the bullshit, and it's just perfect. It's to the point. And we should never forget the beauty in the simplicity, and the beauty of what only Mother Nature can give. So despite all the quote unquote luxury in the big opera, I always find the greatest pleasure and satisfaction in the very simple, honest things.
It's beautiful. So speaking of simplicity, this our next segment is brought to you by Asylum Cigars. Refuge is more than just a physical place, like you just described. It can be a state of mind. Some of life's greatest reflections can be found in our own personal asylum. Moments like these were made for Asylum Cigars. So light up an asylum and choose your refuge. So this segment, Reinhard, is about, and you've probably had several of these opportunities, but as we've talked at length today, the cigar experience is best enjoyed with others. It opens up doors and windows and worlds that we had no idea it existed, or only hoped that they did. But every
Mhm.
so often, we get to enjoy a moment singularly by ourselves in seclusion with a cigar. And it can be a moment of celebration. It can be just a moment of pondering. Um, Again, you probably had several moments of these, so I won't ask you for your favorite, but what's a moment that comes to mind where nobody else was around? It was just you and a cigar. What was that moment about? And if you can remember, what were you smoking?
Hmm. Well, I think the one that I will remember for the rest of my life was the one I told you about earlier, when I had my first ever cigar and my first ever cocktail, listening to the great Americana in the background. And
Mm-hmm.
the cigar was a Candlelight Brazil machine made short filler. So really
Mm-hmm.
nothing that anybody would find spectacular, or nothing to be profoundly proud about as your first cigar. But it was a door opener for me to a world that I could only dream about, and I sort of gravitated towards, and I wanted to be a part of, even though I by no means could afford it or could see myself in it. But just that, that moment of being there, and feeling at home and feeling like I belonged there was incredible.
It's like you found your place, right? The place you're
Mm,
supposed to be. Yeah,
couldn't agree more.
that's awesome. Well, the time has come for our last question of the evening. And it, of course, is always Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust's curveball segment. Fastballs or curveballs, it doesn't matter since the company's inception. Steve Saka's been knocking them out of the park 9 consecutive years in the consensus top three. Congratulations to our good friend, Mr. Steve Saka. So we we talked a lot about the moment in which Light 'em Up Lounge came to be, and some of the doors that it opened for you. Um, so my curveball question is, if Light 'em Up Lounge had never happened, where would Reinhard Pohorec be tonight, and what would you be doing? Or in this case, this morning, but go with me on this, and let's just make it an evening.
You know what? I'd probably be sitting here with you on the 305th take of ELOSOFUMAR, and we'd be talking about your history and my history and the Meerapfel cigar and the Meerapfel family's history. And we would have somehow ended up at the exact same place and talking about the exact same things,
Okay.
because life has its ways, and though we often don't understand or can't make sense of it when we experience it, but it seemingly all falls into place. And I have to say that I'm I'm not a do you say superficial, or not
Superstitious?
superstitious, pardon, superstitious person, and I don't believe in fate per se, as in, this is your way, and no matter what you do, you'll always end up at the same place and doing the exact same things because it's all predetermined. I don't believe that. Um, but I think that ever so often in life, we're presented with certain challenges and with opportunities in order to grow and advance on our journey and evolve as a human being. And God knows my life wasn't wasn't easy all the time, and I've had plenty of challenges and hurdles to overcome, but I treasure every single moment and every single experience, particularly the tough ones and the unpleasant ones, because that's what truly forms us as a human being. And I'm grateful, beyond grateful for every single moment. I love life. I love people. I love exploring. I love great products. And I'm just one of the happiest persons you could possibly meet, and at the same time one of the most grateful and humble people, because I know that nothing in life is you can take nothing for granted, and
Mhm.
it all takes a lot of hard work and sacrifices, and keeping your head down and keep on going. But at the end of the day, it's a beautiful journey, and we should be tremendously grateful for every single moment. It's nothing's for granted, so, but at the same time, it's all beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. It's the first person anyone's ever taken the curveball segment and flipped it up on its head, though. I will say that. So, um, no, I couldn't agree with more. I think to your point, Reinhardt, I think it's um um I think I differ slightly, but agree with you at the same time. I do believe into a certain degree of fate. Um, Having the religious background that I do personally, um, but I think there's something very magical and very freeing at the same time that we as humans don't fully understand what that fate is. That's just my opinion and perspective. Life's a journey, and I think that I think to your point, we need to enjoy every moment that it brings us, and um, we all have our degrees of challenges, um, and big or small. At the end, they all have a way of becoming smaller in size, because it all gets us to where we need to get going. So, um, congratulations, my friend, on all that you've accomplished thus far in your short but storied time in the industry. Um, Unbelievable success to you, and I know only more success is coming. I'm really excited to see what comes from Meerapfel Cigar, but also what comes from you, and I know it'll be great things. I've immensely enjoyed these cigars with you tonight. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share them with you. Thank you so
Thank you,
much
there.
for getting up so early
Oh,
or not going to sleep. We haven't really determined that. Whichever one it was. Thank you so much
neither
for
have I.
thank you so much for going through all the effort, especially after such a busy
Oh,
week at
please.
Intertabac. So
It's been a tremendous pleasure and a privilege for me, Bear. So I can't thank you enough for having me on the show, and allowing me to share a little bit of my journey, and what we do with Meerapfel Cigar. You are an incredibly valuable and important part of our industry and our ecosystem, and your contribution cannot be treasured highly enough. It's because of people like yourself that I get up every single day, and I'm inspired. I'm, I'm I'm motivated more than ever to give it my all, and to try and do the best that I can to help the industry grow and evolve and live on. And so the gratitude is all mine, and really I so thoroughly enjoyed the wonderful questions, the insightful thoughts, and spending time with you.
wonderful. Well, on that note, thank you for the humbling words. But on that note, we'll put this show to a close, and I want to thank all my viewers for staying up late with us as always. Or if you are listening or watching us across the pond with Reinhard, I know you guys got up early for this, so I appreciate that as well. You can always check out our YouTube channel later on as we post all our videos later. You can hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell. That way, it lets you know that when a new video posts. And of course, if you are listening to us later via podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts, including iHeartRadio, you're doing so because of Grand Habano Cigars, who sponsors our audio broadcast every week. Honest, compassionate, great cigars. Be sure you download, subscribe, and review today. The key is the review, everybody. And I really want to thank everybody that's done some reviews lately. Really means a lot to me. And to the gentleman who gave me the 1-star review and told me it was because of poor audio, I assure you we are trying on it. We're only 305 episodes into this, so we're always trying to improve and make better. So thank you for the valuable feedback, and I mean that sincerely. To the gentleman who left the 1-star review with no commentary, I don't know how to help you. So do better next time, and I'll do better, I promise. So, but without further ado, it's my pleasure to wish everyone a good night, good evening, or good morning in my guest's case. It has been an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much. For everyone out there, keep those likes, shares, and comments. Keep them coming. My name is Barry Duplessis. I'm live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studio of Azle, Texas. This was our 305th take. As I mentioned, I'm Bear. He's Reinhard. And guess what, everybody? See you next time.
Night.